Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep into the ideas of Deepak Chopra.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and specifically from his audiobook, The Book of Secrets.
Okay.
I mean, it's really like a whole different way of seeing the world.
Yeah, it really is. I think um, Chopra's not just like offering a set of beliefs,
Yeah.
It's more like proposing a whole different operating system for experiencing life.
Yeah, I love that. An operating system. Okay, so he starts with this idea of duality versus wholeness.
Right.
And that really sets the stage for everything else. He says we're often stuck in this ego-based system where everything is separate.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to fear and,
Yeah.
a need to control.
Yeah. It's like we're building walls around ourselves constantly on guard,
Yeah.
against some perceived threat out there.
Yeah.
But Chopra argues that there's another way of being a system of wholeness where we recognize the interconnectedness of everything.
So instead of feeling like isolated individuals battling the world,
Yeah.
we could see ourselves as part of something much bigger and more harmonious. I can see how that shift in perspective could be really liberating.
It is, and to illustrate this, he uses a really relatable example.
Okay.
A car accident.
Oh, okay.
Imagine you're in a fender bender, right?
Mhm.
And the other driver is totally at fault, but they're being a real jerk about it.
Oh, I can feel my blood pressure rising just thinking about it.
Right.
In that moment, it's so easy to get caught up in the anger and the blame,
Yeah.
feeling like a victim.
Right. That's the duality system in action.
Yeah.
But what if instead of seeing that other driver as like the enemy, you saw them as a messenger?
Oh, okay.
Chopra suggests that every experience, even a negative one,
Right.
offers an opportunity for self-discovery.
So in that fender bender scenario,
Yeah.
maybe instead of getting furious,
Mm-hmm.
I could take a breath and ask myself, what is this experience trying to teach me about myself?
Exactly.
Is there something I need to heal or let go of?
Yeah, it's not about like condoning bad behavior or anything, but rather about using challenging experiences as like catalysts for growth.
Okay, that's a profound shift in perspective. But Chopra takes it even further. He says, you are the creator. Whoa.
Yeah,
That's a bold statement.
it is. And I think a lot of people misinterpret what he means by that.
Okay.
He's not suggesting that we have, magical powers to control the universe or anything.
Right.
It's more about recognizing that our thoughts, our beliefs, and our perceptions actually shape our reality.
So it's like we're constantly creating our own world with our minds,
Yes.
whether we're conscious of it or not.
Yes, and that's why he emphasizes the importance of becoming aware of our thought patterns.
Mm-hmm.
If we're constantly focused on negativity, we're more likely to attract negative experiences.
Yeah.
But if we cultivate positive thoughts and beliefs, then we can start to create a more fulfilling reality.
Okay, that makes sense. But I can already hear the skeptic saying, come on, if I just think positive thoughts, all my problems will disappear.
Well, Chopra addresses that skepticism directly. He says our addiction to the duality system is so strong
Okay.
that we often miss the subtle shifts that happen when we change our perception. It's like we're so used to seeing the world through a particular lens
Right.
that we don't even realize there are other ways of seeing.
So maybe the key is to start paying more attention to the connection between our thoughts and our experiences.
Yes.
If we can become more aware of how our inner world is shaping our outer world,
Mhm.
that's a huge first step.
Absolutely. It's about becoming conscious creators rather than unconscious reactors.
So this whole idea of shifting from duality to wholeness and becoming the creator of our reality is really intriguing, but it also raises some big questions. Like,
Okay.
what about evil?
Yeah.
If we're all interconnected and we're all creating our own reality, then where does evil fit into the picture?
That's a question that Chopra tackles head on.
Okay.
And his perspective is, again, quite different from the conventional view.
Okay.
He doesn't see evil as some external force or demonic entity or anything like that.
Right.
He sees it as a reflection of ourselves,
Okay.
a manifestation of what he calls the shadow self.
And to be clear, we're not talking about a literal shadow lurking behind us.
All right.
The shadow self is more like a psychological concept.
Right, exactly. It's the part of ourselves that we repress,
Yeah.
deny, or try to hide.
Okay.
The fears, the anger, the shame,
Mm-hmm.
all the stuff we deem unacceptable.
So it's like we all have this dark side, this shadow self that we try to keep hidden away.
Right.
But Chopra's suggesting that it's actually a natural part of us.
Yeah.
Not something to be feared or demonized.
Right, and this is where his perspective gets really interesting.
Okay.
He argues that the shadow self isn't inherently bad.
Okay.
It's just energy that needs to be acknowledged and integrated.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he even suggests that evil or what we perceive as evil, can play a role in our growth and evolution.
Okay, now that's a mind bender.
Yeah.
How can something that causes so much suffering be part of a positive process?
Well, he uses the analogy of a hierarchy.
Yeah.
He says, evil is part of a hierarchy, the ladder of growth, in which everything changes depending on the rung you happen to be standing on. And it's like, from a limited perspective, certain actions or behaviors might seem purely evil.
Right.
But from a higher perspective, they might be part of a larger, more complex process of unfolding.
So it's not about condoning evil, but about understanding it in a larger context.
Exactly.
And maybe even seeing how it can potentially lead to growth or transformation.
Exactly. And to illustrate this point, he brings up the Stanford prison experiment,
Oh, right.
which really highlights how situational influences can bring out the shadow self
Okay.
in anyone, even seemingly good people.
That experiment was definitely disturbing. It showed how easily people can succumb to cruelty when they're given power and anonymity.
Right. But it's also a powerful reminder that we all have the capacity for both good and evil.
Yeah.
It's not about judging ourselves or others, but about recognizing the complexity of human nature.
So if we all have this shadow self, how do we deal with it? Chopra's not suggesting that we just let our dark side run wild, is he?
No, definitely not. He says the key is to bring consciousness to the shadow, to face it with compassion and understanding.
Okay.
He writes, bringing consciousness to any energy diffuses it. If an energy demands your attention, then paying attention will begin to satisfy it.
So it's like instead of trying to suppress or deny our shadow, we need to shine a light on it to bring it into our awareness.
Precisely. And Chopra believes that this process of integrating the shadow is essential for our spiritual growth.
Okay.
It's about becoming whole, embracing all aspects of ourselves, the light and the dark.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Deepak Chopra's The Book of Secrets. Last time we were talking about the shadow self.
Yeah, that was pretty intense stuff. I'm still thinking about it.
It really makes you think differently about yourself
You got
and
it.
all those parts we try to hide.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads us to another one of Chopra's ideas,
Okay.
the multidimensionality of existence.
Multidimensionality of existence.
Okay.
He argues that we're not just living in one dimension, the physical world,
Right.
but in multiple domains of consciousness simultaneously.
Okay, multiple dimensions. I mean, can you give me like a concrete example of
Yeah.
what that means?
Sure. Have you ever had a moment of like intense love where you felt totally connected to another person or maybe to something larger than yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Those moments feel almost transcendent,
Right.
like I'm tapping into something beyond my everyday awareness.
Yeah. Chopra would say you're experiencing a different domain of consciousness.
Okay.
In this case, the domain of love.
Okay.
He also talks about domains like pure being, knowingness, intuition, imagination, and even the physical body as different dimensions of experience.
So it's not like we're physically traveling to other dimensions like in a sci-fi movie or something?
No.
Okay.
It's more about expanding our awareness
Okay.
to include all these different aspects of reality.
So we're not just limited to the physical world. There are all these other layers of reality that we can experience if we expand our awareness.
Precisely. And Chopra suggests that when we focus too narrowly on just one or two domains, the other domains can atrophy.
Oh, okay.
Like, for example, someone who's completely immersed in the rational world of science,
Okay.
and they neglect their intuition or emotional life.
So they might be really good at thinking logically, but they've lost touch with their feelings.
Exactly. It's like using only a few crayons in a box full of colors.
Right.
Chopra wants us to open ourselves up to the whole spectrum of consciousness.
To become more well-rounded and fully alive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so how do we do that? How do we expand our awareness to include these other domains?
Yeah. How do we actually do that?
Well, Chopra uses the term vidya,
Okay.
which is Sanskrit for knowledge or understanding.
Okay.
But it's not just about accumulating information.
Right.
It's about deepening our experience in each domain,
Okay.
becoming more attuned to the subtle energies and patterns that are operating beneath the surface.
So it's like we need to become students of our own consciousness.
Yes.
Exploring these different domains with curiosity and openness.
Yes. And as we do that, our perception of reality begins to shift.
Okay.
We start to see the interconnectedness of everything, the unity that underlies the apparent diversity of the world.
That reminds me of that line from the poet William Blake, to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower. It's like we have the potential to experience the infinite within the finite.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this expanded awareness brings us to Chopra's perspective on death.
Okay.
which, as you might imagine, is quite different from the conventional view.
I have to admit, the idea of death still freaks me out a little.
Yeah, I think that's pretty natural.
What does Chopra have to say about that?
Well, he argues that death isn't an ending,
Okay.
but a natural part of a continuous cycle of renewal and transformation.
So it's kind of like that dying every day idea we talked about earlier,
Right.
but on a much grander scale.
Exactly. He points to the process of apoptosis,
Oh.
which is the constant death and renewal of cells happening within our bodies.
So even though it seems scary, death is actually part of a natural process
Right.
of letting go and making way for something new.
Right. And Chopra suggests that when we embrace this understanding, we can experience a profound sense of liberation.
Okay.
He even talks about this concept of soul space,
A space.
which is the field of awareness that remains unchanged by physical death.
So our physical body is like a temporary vehicle for our soul space,
Okay.
which is this unbounded field of consciousness.
That's a good way to put it. He uses the analogy of a house.
Okay.
If a house burns down, the space inside doesn't disappear.
Right.
It just becomes unbounded, no longer limited by walls and a roof.
So when we die, it's like our soul space is released from the confines of the physical body
Yeah.
and returns to this unbounded field of awareness.
That's the idea. And he even suggests that we may choose to re-enter the physical world in a new form.
Okay.
But he doesn't dwell on the specifics of reincarnation or anything like that.
What I find really helpful about Chopra's perspective is that it takes some of the fear out of death.
Yeah.
If we can see it as a transition rather than an ending, it becomes less terrifying.
And he really emphasizes the importance of surrender
Okay.
as a way to transcend the fear of death. He says, the line between life and death is erased only when you surrender the strategies that you use to perpetuate life. If you erase the line, then you are fully alive.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying that by surrendering to the flow of life, we can actually experience a deeper level of aliveness.
Exactly. It's about letting go of the need to control everything and trusting that there's a larger intelligence guiding us.
So we've explored these big existential questions about duality and wholeness, the shadow self, the multidimensionality of existence, and even death. But there's still one question that I think we all grapple with. What is the meaning of life?
And, Chopra's answer is surprisingly simple. Everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
That's kind of a non-answer, isn't it?
Well, not really. He's saying that the meaning of life isn't something fixed or predetermined.
Okay.
It's constantly unfolding, and we participate in creating it with every thought, every feeling, every action.
I like that. It's empowering because it means we're not just pawns in some cosmic game.
Right.
We have the ability to shape the meaning of our own lives.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And he emphasizes that the universe is constantly reflecting back to us the meaning we project onto it.
Oh, okay.
He uses examples like the placebo effect in medicine,
Okay.
where our beliefs about a treatment can actually influence its effectiveness. To illustrate this.
So it's like we're looking through a two-way mirror.
Yeah.
The universe is reflecting back to us what we believe, and we're also shaping the universe with our thoughts and actions.
That's a great way to visualize it. And this leads to another important concept,
Okay.
closing the gap between observer and observed.
Okay, can you explain that one a bit more?
Sure, we often experience ourselves as separate from the world around us,
Right.
but in reality, there's no separation. We're all part of one interconnected web of existence.
So it's like that saying, we are the universe experiencing itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we start to close that gap between observer and observed,
Okay.
when we start to see ourselves as part of the larger whole, we tap into a profound source of power and possibility.
That's a really intriguing idea, but it also sounds pretty abstract.
Sure.
How do we actually close that gap in a practical way?
Chopra talks about the importance of total understanding,
Okay.
which he describes as a skill developed through full engagement with life.
Okay.
It's about overcoming those reservations we all have about looking bad, failing, experiencing pain, even facing our shadow selves.
It's like we need to jump into the deep end of life without holding back,
Yes.
embracing all of it, the good, the bad, and everything in between.
He uses the analogy of a baby learning to walk.
Okay.
They don't worry about looking silly or falling down.
Yeah.
They just keep trying, driven by an innate desire to master this new skill.
So maybe the key is to approach life with that same childlike curiosity and fearlessness,
Right.
a willingness to embrace the unknown and learn from our mistakes.
Exactly. And as we cultivate this total understanding, as we become more aware of ourselves and our place in the universe, we move closer to experiencing what Chopra calls our essence.
Okay, now this is where I'm getting a little lost. What exactly is essence?
Well, Chopra describes essence as the purest form of being, the ground of all creation.
Okay.
He says it has three core qualities: existence, awareness, and creation.
Okay.
But he also acknowledges that it's difficult to grasp conceptually because it's beyond all qualities and distinctions.
So it's like trying to describe the taste of water.
Yep.
It's something we experience directly, but words can't fully capture it.
That's a great analogy.
Hmm.
And Chopra says that the only way to truly understand essence is to experience it directly,
Okay.
by peeling away the layers of our conditioned minds and connecting with the core of our being.
And he also mentions this sage named Vasishta,
Yeah.
who had some interesting things to say about living from essence right.
Yes. Vasishta's teachings are fascinating because they offer a very practical approach to this seemingly abstract concept.
Okay.
He emphasizes the importance of contentment, inquiry, self-awareness, and strength,
Okay.
and the pursuit of what he calls getting real.
I love that he includes strength as a key quality because it suggests that living from essence isn't about being passive or withdrawing from the world.
Right.
It's about engaging with life fully, with courage and determination.
Exactly. It's about bringing the qualities of our essence, existence, awareness, and creation into every aspect of our lives, from our relationships to our work to our spiritual practices.
So it's like we're not just trying to understand essence intellectually, we're trying to embody it, to let it flow through us and shape our experience of the world.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And this leads us to Chopra's ultimate vision of human potential, what he calls the second birth, or enlightenment.
Okay, so enlightenment isn't just for monks meditating in caves anymore.
Right. He describes it as a state of awareness where we recognize our true nature as pure consciousness, as unbounded awareness, as the source of all creation.
Wow, that sounds incredibly liberating, but it also seems like a really distant goal.
Well, Chopra emphasizes that this second birth isn't a one-time event,
Okay.
but an ongoing process of awakening, of letting go of limiting beliefs and identities, of expanding our awareness to embrace the fullness of reality.
So it's not about reaching some final destination,
Right.
but about enjoying the journey, the constant unfolding of awareness and understanding.
Exactly. And he suggests that as we engage in this process, as we cultivate those qualities that Vasishta talked about, contentment, inquiry, self-awareness, and strength, we begin to experience a profound sense of freedom and joy that's independent of external circumstances.
This deep dive has been incredible. It's really made me think about reality and consciousness differently.
Yeah.
But, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how to actually live these concepts,
Yeah.
Like, how do we take all this and make it practical in our everyday lives?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Chopra talks about that too.
Okay, good.
You know how we were talking about time being an illusion.
Yeah.
Well, he argues that a lot of our suffering comes from getting trapped in worries about the future or regrets about the past.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like our minds are constantly jumping ahead
Mhm.
or dwelling on what already happened.
Yeah, and we miss out on the present moment.
Totally.
So Chopra suggests cultivating what he calls spiritual sobriety.
Spiritual sobriety.
Okay. It's about noticing when our attention drifts away from the present
Okay.
and gently bringing it back.
So instead of getting swept away by all that mental chatter, we can learn to observe our thoughts
Yeah,
and choose to focus on what's happening right now.
exactly. He also talks about the importance of listening to what we're saying,
Okay.
both to ourselves and to others.
It's like really paying attention to our words.
Yeah, because our words reflect our relationship with the universe.
Hmm.
If we're constantly complaining or blaming or judging, we're reinforcing a sense of separation and negativity.
That's a really good point. It's like our words have a kind of energetic power.
Yeah.
If we want to create a more positive reality, we need to start by speaking to ourselves and others with more kindness and compassion.
Exactly. And maybe the most important aspect of spiritual sobriety is questioning our egos.
Okay, how do we do that?
Well, Chopra suggests asking ourselves, why am I doing this? Is this serving me? Is this in alignment with my true self?
I mean, that kind of self-reflection can be uncomfortable,
It can be.
but it's so valuable.
Yeah.
It helps us break free from those habitual patterns that keep us stuck.
Exactly. And along with questioning our egos, Chopra also emphasizes nourishing our souls.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, he talks about spiritual meals,
Spiritual meals, okay.
which could be anything from spending time in nature to reading inspiring books to, practices like meditation or yoga.
So it's about finding those activities that feed our spirit
Yeah.
and help us connect to something bigger than ourselves.
And these practices aren't about escaping from reality or anything.
Right.
They're about cultivating a deeper connection to the present moment,
Okay.
to our own inner wisdom, and to the universal intelligence that flows through all creation.
I love that. Okay, so we're starting to get a sense of how we can apply these teachings to our daily lives.
Yeah.
But what about happiness? I mean, most people are striving for happiness,
Hmm.
but it often feels elusive. So, does Chopra have any advice on finding true happiness?
He does, and his perspective is really interesting.
Okay.
He suggests that true happiness isn't something we achieve
Okay.
by chasing after external pleasures or trying to control our circumstances.
So it's not about acquiring more stuff or getting that promotion or whatever.
It's about connecting with our essence,
Okay.
from recognizing our interconnectedness
Yeah.
with all of creation.
So it's about tapping into something deeper within ourselves.
Exactly. He talks about how our personal happiness can fluctuate,
Okay.
just like the weather.
Right. Some days are good, some days are bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But beneath those surface fluctuations, there's a deeper wellspring of joy and contentment that's always available to us.
So even when things are tough on the outside, we can still find that inner peace.
Exactly. And he also talks about freedom.
Okay.
He says it's not about getting everything we want
Right.
or controlling our circumstances, but it's more about aligning our actions with the current of Dharma, with the evolutionary flow of the universe.
So it's less about me and more about we, less
Mhm.
about personal gain and more about contributing to something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. And one way to cultivate that sense of interconnectedness is through practices like meditation.
Okay.
When we meditate, we connect with the field of pure potentiality that exists before thoughts and desires arise.
It's like we're tapping into the source code of reality, the
Yeah.
creative energy that's constantly giving birth to new possibilities.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And this brings us back to that concept of the second birth or enlightenment.
Right. Enlightenment.
Yeah.
So what does that actually look like? Is it like a sudden realization or more of a gradual process?
Well, Chopra describes it as a state of awareness, where we recognize our true nature as pure consciousness, as unbounded awareness, as the source of all creation.
It's like waking up from a long dream and realizing that we're not just these limited, separate selves.
Right.
We are the universe experiencing itself.
Exactly. And the important thing is that Chopra believes this second birth is possible for anyone.
Okay, so it's not just for like spiritual masters or something?
No, he suggests that it's available to each and every one of us.
That's encouraging. But how do we even begin to approach such a profound transformation?
Well, it starts with recognizing that it's not a one-time event.
Okay.
It's an ongoing process.
Okay.
It's about letting go of limiting beliefs and identities and expanding our awareness to embrace the fullness of reality. It's about cultivating those qualities of contentment, inquiry, self-awareness, and strength that Vosa spoke of.
It sounds like a lifelong journey of self-discovery.
It is. And as we engage in this process, we start to experience a profound sense of freedom and joy that's independent of external circumstances.
Hmm.
It's the kind of happiness that can't be taken away because it's rooted in our very being.
Well, this deep dive into Deepak Chopra's The Book of Secrets has been amazing. It's given me so much to think about, and I hope it's done the same for our listeners.
Me too?
And before we go, I want to leave everyone with a final thought-provoking question from Vasishta, that wise sage we talked about. If you could experience the universe as one long dream, how might that change your perception of the world and your place in it? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.